Okay, everyone, we are here today with Bianca Woods. She is a connection of mine through Twitter. We both have a mutual friend, and that's how we found each other. And I wanted to give you the opportunity today to hear a little bit about her and learn a little bit more about some of her passions. So, with that, Bianca, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure, and thanks for having me here today.
Mm-hmm.
My name is Bianca Woods. I have two roles right now. First is I am the Senior Manager of Programming with the eLearning Guild. So we put on a lot of online and in-person events for people in L&D, and my role with them is to work on programming the content for that and helping speakers and encouraging new people to share their voices as well. Then, as sort of my side gig, I also have a company called Clever Raptor. And what I do with that company is I do instructional design and presentation design consulting as well.
Awesome, awesome. So tell me, how did what is the story of you? How did you get where you are? How did you get these dual roles? Yeah, just tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I originally trained to be a classroom teacher. I taught art, and I did that for a year in Central Florida, but then was sort of desperate to move back home to Toronto, Canada, which is where I was born and raised, and moved back only to find there were no teaching jobs. So, I was working at trying to get back into teaching, frustratedly working as an EA to pay the bills. And I was talking about the situation to someone I had just recently met, and he said, "Oh, well, why aren't you looking at instructional design jobs?" And, I probably made a strange face and looked at him because I had no idea what he was talking about. I didn't know what an instructional designer was because it's not something they tell you about when you're training to be a teacher. But I looked into it and got really excited about the possibilities. I went back to grad school, got a degree in, it's a mouthful, education, media, design, and technology, which is essentially just how to use technology and media to teach people stuff, and started working as an ID with one of the big Canadian banks up here. Had a lot of really interesting roles with them. Also did a bit of presentation design consulting while I was there as well. There's a lot of really good overlap between instructional design skills and presentation design skills. And then ended up segueing into working with the eLearning Guild, which is an organization I had been doing conference talks at for quite some time. It was really exciting to get that job, but I wanted to still make sure that I was doing instructional design and presentation design myself, which is why I sort of came up with this other company that I could do that on the side as well.
That's awesome. It's so funny that our stories are very similar. So I didn't start out in art education, but I too kind of fell into instructional design by accident. And just like you, I kind of like when people started talking about it, I was like, I didn't even know that was a thing. Like people do that for work. And just, for me, I didn't even know that I could be artistic or creative or anything like that because it was, like K through 12, they don't really teach about like visual design and graphic design and, all that kind of stuff. They just tell you that art is painting or, drawing or whatever. And I wasn't particularly good at those things. So it's interesting that you kind of fell into this. For you, what do you think the biggest, I guess, similarities are between presentation design versus e-learning or instructional design courses?
Yeah, well, I think there's two big things that for me they have in common. First is you have to tell a compelling story that ties into what your audience is interested in. And, you can't just say whatever you want, display data, and just hope for the best. You need to really understand who is this content for? What do they care about? What do they not care about? What do they already know? What do they not know? What's going to be compelling for them? And in order to make something that's going to be meaningful to them and stick with them. And like that's across the board, whether it's e-learning or a presentation, you have to really think about the person who you're designing for. As well, I think both great presentations and great e-learning leverage visuals to communicate information in efficient ways. There are so many times where you've got a concept or an idea where it would take you sentences to explain it or just a simple graphic. And there's so many powerful ways where we can simplify the content we're sharing by leveraging graphics in a thoughtful way.
So we talked a little before
Mhm.
about visual design, and I'll be honest, I could totally geek out right now on visual design. Um, but what do you think are the fundamentals? What do people really have to, when they think of visual design, what are the things that they need to, at a very basic level, focus on?
Yeah, and I think this is a really big challenge in both instructional design, presentation design, anytime where we ask people who don't have formal training in design to do design tasks, is we have this idea of confusing creativity and artistic skill. And people go, well, I can't paint, I can't draw, kind of like what you were saying earlier. So clearly I'm not creative. And that's not what creativity is. I mean, you have to use creativity to draw and paint, but creativity is just sort of finding new connections, new ideas, and what have you. And I think we all do that in the work we do. We just might not think of it as creativity.
Mm-hmm.
And then what you have to do is once you can get people past that idea of, no, you can be creative, you can handle some of this visual design stuff, even if you aren't a trained graphic designer. Some of it is just teaching people some really quick, good, just simple concepts from graphic design that anyone can learn how to use.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the things that I tend to start out with when I'm helping people work on their graphic design skills, especially the people who go, I am not an artistic person, is things like being thoughtful about the fonts that you use, not
Mm-hmm.
using too many. I usually suggest one or two tops. If you use two, use them consistently. So one for your headers, another one for your body text. Another thing I recommend to people is figure out a color palette. One
Mm-hmm.
thing that inexperienced people tend to do when they're doing graphic design is use a lot of colors without consistency, which can make it look chaotic. And if you have a color palette, which is just a small selection of colors that you use consistently throughout a project and that all look good together, it gives you rules about what colors you're using and when. So you could be like, all right, I have this color palette of 6 colors. That first color, I am always using that for my headers. That second color, I'm always using it for background fills, that sort of a thing. So it simplifies the colors you're using and helps you use them in a way that feels consistent to your audience and is kind of hard to mess up,
Mm-hmm.
which is always reassuring if you're not someone who's really comfortable about your color use. I'm trying to think. Some other things I like to talk to people about is grid layouts. That's a really, really easy one. If you're not comfortable with laying out things on a page or on a slide, is to leverage a grid. And grid designs are something graphic designers use. They'll use really complicated ones. I recommend if you're just getting started, you can just break up your area into a 3x4 grid and then put different kinds of information in one or more of the grid squares. It helps it keep your design look really organized. You can't fit too much or too little. Keeps it from being chaotic, which is something that I think can be a real problem, and keep everything sort of in alignment because you want things to look clean and tidy, and having crisp lines delineating where this kind of content goes versus that kind of content, that can help a lot.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And now you talked about, one thing that beginners often do is use tons of different colors
Mm-hmm.
and not use them consistently. Are there any other things that you see that are, simple to fix no-nos?
Yeah, so image use is an interesting one. I think that's kind of right up there with font choice and colors on it happens a lot. It's super easy to fix.
Yep.
So beginners tend to use images in ineffective ways. I'll see, let's say we're doing presentation design, I'll see a slide and it's got half a dozen images on it, all of which are might be slightly related, but it's just, can I cover the screen with as many images as possible? And it's not terribly effective, particularly if those images don't look like they go together. I usually recommend people use less images and make sure they're really high quality, really well connected to the topic. Using images that aren't connected to the topic is a big one where people are like, oh, I just want it to look attractive.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're putting an image there, it should be doing something to help your message, even if it's just reinforcing your message, or hopefully it's helping to add some additional context. So you want to make sure that if a visual is there, it has a job and it's connected to what you're doing. People also will sometimes warp images to make them fit into a spot on the screen, so they'll stretch them out, and so it'll either make the image look really pulled out tall or pulled out wide. Even if you don't have a graphic design background, you'll notice that. And it's one of those really, really quick ways where someone can look at something that's designed and go, oh, that just wasn't made by a professional graphic designer. So it's one of those things where I recommend always, you know, if you need to make an image larger, keep the scale the same. If the image you have doesn't fit in the spot you need it to, don't warp it to make it fit. Either crop it to make it fit or pick another image if it really doesn't work in that spot.
Right.
And then you want to, with images, you want to avoid things that you've seen 8 million times before, things that are kind of trite. The example I always use, because I hate it so much, is when you're trying to look for an image that represents globalization, global workforce, what have you, and you've got an image of a globe and then 2 hands shaking in front of the globe.
Oh, that's my favorite one.
It's been done so many times, and if you're using an image that's been, people have seen too much, it doesn't even register for them. Or they'll look at what you've created and go, well, that's kind of played out, or that seems dated.
Yep.
And so it is about looking for sources of images that don't feel trite. With group photos, people tend to respond pretty poorly to ones that look like obviously staged. Basically, anything you remember as clip art from the 90s, avoid.
Yes.
And you know, it used to be, like, even 5 years ago, difficult to do this if you were on a budget. You were usually pretty much stuck with whatever clip art and photos that you had at your organization. Now there are so many free resources online for photos that are licensed for you to use, but you either don't have to pay any money for, or you only have to pay a minor amount of money for.
Right. Yeah, there's so many good resources nowadays. Definitely. So how does all this, I know you said you started your own consulting business so you could continue to do some of this ID, but do you take this into your role at the e-learning guild also, or are they very separate?
No, they're pretty similar. It's interesting because when I used to just be someone who spoke at e-learning guild events, the thing I spoke about most was visual design. So that sort of followed me there. So it's something people on my team know I'm keen on and I like participating in. We have our own graphic design department. They're phenomenal, but when I have a chance to add my voice, I love to. I'm on the programming team, and sometimes we're doing stuff on our own. It's lovely to be able to use my skills for that. And, you know, obviously when we're taking a look at any kind of presentations and, you know, we're evaluating ones that are specifically on visual design, graphic design, it's nice to be able to use that extra bit of expertise to evaluate those proposals. Plus, I've, you know, only on occasion, but I've helped speakers with their decks on occasion where they were really stressed out and looking for someone to help them make a deck that matched the story they wanted to tell.
Right.
And that's, you know, it's not a regular part of my job, but I really love being able to do that.
Yeah, no, I hear you. That's something that I really enjoy too. You know, I remember at some, you know, past employers, it would just be someone's working on a presentation and they really want to win that grant, or they really want to sell whatever, you know, and just kind of having them come to me and, you know, ask, can you help me tell my story? Or, you know, my visuals, you know, I know what I want to say, but it's just not translating onto paper or, you know, or onto the screen, you know, and just, you know, for me, it's something that I love helping people with. You know, like I would do it, I mean, I shouldn't say this, but I would do it for free because I like it doing it that much, you know? So
it's a valuable skill. You should be paid appropriately for it.
You hear that, everybody? No.
Yeah. No, and and this is something that we chatted about before we started the recording of, you know, a lot of people have the rough idea of here are the information I need to get across, and they're just not sure when it comes to presentation design. How do you do that effectively? They can look at their own decks and often know something isn't quite right.
Mhm.
but they can't articulate anything more than, well, I know it isn't working. And
Mhm.
it's really nifty to be able to go in and help coach people on that, because,
Right.
I mean, I did some of that design consulting on presentation design at my last role at the bank before I took on this job. And, you know, a lot of it was helping to coach people to learn these skills themselves. And they walk into that room thinking, there's no way I can learn to do this. Bianca's just going to make my deck for me. It's all good.
Mhm.
And yes, I would help them make their deck. But we'd start off the conversation not about how do we want your slides to look, but what's the story you're trying to tell? We'd get that all down pat first and then start talking about the visuals. And then I talked them through my process so they could start learning to do some of this themselves.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. And the biggest thing for me is getting them to think in that different way.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's so many people, you know, you meet with them and it's just all about sell, 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 or,
Yeah.
you know, give statistics or, you know, whatever. And it's taking them back and helping them really understand, you know, it's about telling a story, you know, and you know, sometimes I, you know, work with people to build presentations, and they come to me and they say, well, you know, you don't have on your resume that you that you do presentation development or you know whatever, and you're an instructional designer, and it's like, yeah, but they're the same thing, because you're telling a story and you're teaching your audience something that you want them to walk away with, whether it's why your product is great and they should
Yeah.
buy it, or you know, this is how, you know, the service I provide is going to help your business. It's the same. You're teaching them something.
Yeah,
um,
absolutely.
yeah, so that's so important. And the other thing I feel like is, so often when these people come to me, they're all stressed out and they say, well, I put this together and it looks horrible, or you know, whatever. And the first thing I always say is, it's, don't worry about it. It wasn't your job to know. Your job was to sell this product,
Yeah.
or you know, whatever. Your job wasn't to build a PowerPoint. You know, so let's take it back. Let's focus on how we can make it better, and you know, get you to think in a different way to create this. And then that seems like they they calm down usually at
Yeah.
that point.
Well, it's funny because so many people go, oh, I hate PowerPoint, blah, 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 blah. But so much of it is you have people who don't know, who haven't been trained in any kind of skills about storytelling or graphic design, who are given the software because it's pretty much on all of our computers.
Mhm.
And it's no wonder that there are a lot of really kind of awful PowerPoints out there, because it's a skill set to build them. And a lot of people who are asked to make them don't have that skill set, don't even realize it's something that they can work on, or that isn't, you know, something you just inherently can make happen by just having the software.
Mhm. Yeah,
The software
completely
is
agree.
not magic. And, you know, if you see a lot of bad PowerPoints, it's not the software's fault.
Mhm.
But also, it's good to respect that if you're asking people who don't have a storytelling or graphic design background to make a PowerPoint, don't be hard on them if what they make is just okay.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the other thing that's a downfall, I think it was trying to be helpful, but was when PowerPoint created all these templates.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they're great, I guess, but I feel like I can't, personally, I can't really support anyone using them on a regular basis. I just feel like it would be better almost, I feel like, tell to just give people a blank white PowerPoint slide that has nothing on it, and just teach them how to put some text boxes and colors and shapes in there. And they probably would come up with something better on their own than feeling like they have to cram everything into this template.
Yeah. So, do you use the Apple version Keynote?
Yes. Hmm.
Yeah. So I had a debate with a friend of mine years back, and we were going back and forth about which was better, PowerPoint or Keynote. And at this
Hmm.
point, both pieces of software have practically all the same functionality.
Hmm.
And one of the points that my friend brought up that I think is a really good point is, what are the templates like? So if you look
Hmm.
at the PowerPoint templates, the thing that they all do is that starting slide they give you when you create a brand new PowerPoint deck using one of the templates is one that immediately puts you into writing bullets.
Hmm.
That's the default for every single one of those templates. So of course, it funnels people into, I'm in PowerPoint, of course I should add bullets, especially if they have no idea what else to do. The
Right.
Keynote templates don't start out with bullets. And it's, it's design choices like that from on the point of the software
Mhm.
that sort of encourages you to think about how to use that software in a different way. So,
Mhm.
by just simply not starting you out with bullets, subconsciously is telling you don't have to use bullets.
That's such a good point, because what are the things that people always, get feedback on about their PowerPoints? Too much text, too many
Yes.
bullets, too much text in bullets. Like those are the biggest things. So yeah, you're totally right. They should just reevaluate that in general. So we are getting to the end of our time, and I've enjoyed talking to you so much. But is there anything that you would like to say before we hang up? Anything that you want people to hear? Um, yeah, anything.
I think, and this is a thing that whenever I talk about design, I always want to get across is that you don't have to be an outstanding artist to be able to learn the basics of graphic design. I
Hmm.
earnestly believe in my heart that every person, no matter what their fine art skill is, can learn to do graphic design basics themselves.
Yes, agreed.
It's just a matter of a little bit of practice and experimentation and being willing to kind of suck for a little while until you get better. It's hard, especially for those of us as adults learning a new skill, to be in that awkward, ugly duckling phase.
Hmm.
But you get past it really fast, and it's you'll be so surprised by what you're able to do if you just put a little time and effort into learning the basics.
Yep, I completely agree. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, and I hope to talk to you soon.
Yeah, this was so much fun.
Yeah, thank you.